This is an RNZ podcast.
Time for Midweek Media Watch, the first of 2026. Bit of a tongue twister. Colin Peacock is with us in our Wellington studio. Kia ora, Colin.
Kia ora, Susanna. And yes, it's sunny Wellington today, 23 degrees I think it hit. I went out about 6 p.m, rode up a hill for a bit of pre-Midweek Media Watch exercise.
Impressive.
Yep, so the place to be, what's that cliche they say about Wellington and its weather?
Can't beat it on a good day.
That's the one that was on the tip. It was one of those days today. I've been out of town and away basically since Media Watch has been off air and nights, and I gather there haven't been too many good days in that time, along with other parts of the country. But of course, you can't gripe about the weather given what others in the northern parts of the country in particular have had to deal with lately.
Exactly. Mount Maunganui.
For me personally, down in the South Island, and I was in a lot of places when the events unfolded where I was really unplugged from the news, which, for me is unusual. Even when I'm on a break, I'm usually a bit hooked into it. I can't give it up. But I was in places with no service, certainly no shops, no newspapers or anything like that. So for me, it's been quite interesting as an exercise to look back on almost retrospectively how it was covered, and learning the full knowledge and the horror of what had happened, and also seeing the scenes from East Cape and other places where...
Yes, I know I just sort of, I reduced it there unintentionally because we have Welcome Bay, we have the devastation in Northland, East Cape and other places. No question the big news story of this year so far.
Yeah, and that's actually an important factor I think you've hit on there in terms of the media coverage, because when you have a tragedy so overwhelming as what happened on Mauao and Mount Maunganui, then and in Welcome Bay, it's easy to perhaps overlook, or that other areas are overlooked or play second fiddle. That sort of hasn't been the case in some of the coverage. So overall, I think it's been really excellent when I've looked back at it, and I've got a really great picture of what happened and why, and the sequence of events, even which details have emerged in the subsequent days, which are highly relevant. I think the media have done a great job collectively of sifting those important things and presenting those and getting responses from those in local authority and in national government to those events, and then pressing forward a bit and thinking what the response should be, even dealing with those hiccups, if you like, in the process where the recovery in response had to be paused because of the danger of further landslips. Indeed, it happened today, didn't it? There were evacuations in Papamoa. So yes. I think it's all been I feel really well informed as someone who came to it late. I would, if I was to single out people for that aspect that I mentioned there of not overlooking other areas other than Mount Maunganui, TVNZ I thought have been really good. They've had particularly Henry McMillan in East Cape filing day by day. The Herald has had a big team doing it, following the politicians as well as the local reporters. Michael Mora, who was hired last year to sort of beef up their video presence and online content, he's been doing compelling reporting. And also the Bay of Plenty Times, because these days our regional and local newspapers haven't got the staff and resources they used to have. But when things like this happen, it can become the other side of it. The flip side is the benefit of belonging to a big chain, in this case NZME, the publishers of the New Zealand Herald. So they've been able to call on other resources, other reporters as well, and I took a look at their weekend edition. It was something else. There was a lot, page after page of coverage, and at that point, there was still looking for people who'd been victims of that landslide. They were attending tributes, reflecting the anguish of the community, as well as, the facts of what had happened. And I think that was really, really impressive. And Monday's edition, has this extremely stark front cover with the victims' names on it. And a quote from the statement from Ngāti Ranginui in the area as well. It's quite an affecting publication. And overall, I think journalists probing questions have really helped establish the pattern of what happened. They show now that we have, as is also being interrogated, a system that just didn't work and didn't escalate the warnings that might have saved lives and avoided a tragedy. And I think all that in the end will actually help with the official inquiries to come, and people will understand them a lot more when the story perhaps fades away from the headlines and comes back when the findings of the inquiries, both the Tauranga Council and the government, eventually, come to pass.
Any sour notes or, dare I say it, bad reporting, things that could have been done better?
Well, this is going to sound really trivial, and forgive me, but there was one quite unfortunate, but in the Bay of Plenty Times on Monday, as I said, it had 5 or 6 full pages of coverage, and not just from the devastation in Mount Maunganui and the Bay of Plenty area, that they also reflected what had happened elsewhere on East Cape and Northland and so on. But they had wedged into the middle of it a kind of bright orange advert for a yet-to-be-built retirement village, with the very optimistic sunshine colours all over it, saying, can you imagine it living in the sunny days to come in the Bay? And it just looked out of place. But look, it's just one of those things. It was unfortunate, didn't detract from their coverage at all. But I mean, more seriously, the sour note, I think, was some of that online misinformation that we've seen. Unsubstantiated claims made about, tree removal being instigated by iwi who may have, co-governance rights or roles over Mauao, that would have caused the deadly landslide. And for my own social media feeds, and the Media Watch program, for example, still has an account on X, which is kind of dormant, but I still use it to read and follow people's posts from the United States and other places where it still has a use. But the social media algorithms were amping up these things, these posts that were clearly slanted and misinformation. It just for example on X. It was directing me to Cameron Whale Oil Slater, and it claims on X that co-governance had caused this. Many online outlets who were sceptical about this had cited an engineer by the name of Rod Kane, who had posted that he believed tree removal at the insistence of iwi with a cooperating council had been a cause of the disaster. Even, comments by Barry Young, a former Health NZ IT worker who was arrested and was charged with, leaking. He was an anti-vaccine activist, and he leaked data from Health New Zealand for dishonest purposes and went to trial for that. His takes on the whole thing were promoted by social media. So that's really kind of worrying. But I think, on the flip side, Stuff, the Herald, RNZ, all did a really good job just in the last couple of days debunking that and adding context. And the Prime Minister himself highlighted that. But also, mentioning the Prime Minister, and this was discussed also on the Whip just a short time ago with Wallace and his guests, the criticism of the Prime Minister I found a bit weird for, flying in the helicopter. Of course, everything a PM does is going to be scrutinised. But just to pick out one example, this is One News and an intro to a report from East Cape by Henry McMillan.
You came, you saw, but where's our relief support, Prime Minister? That from East Cape residents after Christopher Luxon choppered into the flood-damaged area on Friday. Since his visit, 30 homes were evacuated yesterday afternoon due to landslide risks.
Yeah, see, that seems a bit harsh to me. I mean, fair enough if that's what local people were actually telling reporters in TVNZ, but it wasn't really the main tone of Henry's report at all from Te Araroa in that case. And I think it did kind of reflect some of that politically inspired, personal criticism of Christopher Luxon and his style. And it feels to me like he almost can't win, as the folks on the Whip were saying to Wallace, the PM was asked by media whether he should have actually gone there on Thursday. He didn't have public events. Why wasn't he there? And he said, well, I didn't want to be a distraction to the recovery events. And I think that would have happened if he'd gone there. He would have been criticised for that. And I think he gets a hard time for his style and his personal presence and the way he fronts the media. I think they're very critical, and it didn't feel to me that was appropriate. And by all accounts, the political reporters are saying he conducted himself really well, attended vigils and spoke to community groups and did a good job, and his presence was actually welcome on the ground so far as I can tell.
And of course there have been plenty of claims that the tragedies have been politicised. And those have been reported too. Yeah,
and they talked a bit about that on the Whip, didn't they? With Corin and Tracy Martin had things to say about that. But to me, it just feels a bit. Of course, we report what our senior politicians say, and if they're asked questions about these things on talk radio and so on, well, then it will be discussed. But it feels to me like not a great use of the media's time or the public's attention to report sort of to and fro comments between the likes of David Seymour, Chloe Swarbrick, Winston Peters, whatever, about whether the government had done enough about climate change and whether that was really relevant at a time of tragedy. Just one sort of example of this sort of thing. This was on News Talk ZB yesterday, I think. It was Ryan Bridge on his morning show, and he was talking quite critically he's criticised people in Thames when the Prime Minister went there, and he was heckled about climate policy.
1, we still have teenagers trapped under a landslide at the Mount. Their families, desperate, emotional as you can well imagine, banners shouting anger through the news at a time like this, I would have thought was a bit much. Number 2, the idea that by closing a few farms and getting rid of some cows in New Zealand, you will somehow stop the rain from falling and the landslides from slipping is just wrong.
Yeah, no, that feels harsh. He made a big deal, really, after playing a bit of audio of what sounded like little more than 2, 3, maybe 4 people heckling him, the Prime Minister, when he appeared in public. He's kind of making assumptions, I think, about what people really care about. He was saying that, look, it's inappropriate to hassle the Prime Minister about climate policy at a time when of tragedy, when local people are grieving. And yeah, it's hard to argue with that. But I've heard that argument also today a lot on talk radio about people saying that the argument is stupid because even if New Zealand cut its emissions and had a climate policy such as, some people would prefer, it wouldn't have stopped the landslide happening or the rain from falling. And clearly that's not what it's about. It's about whether, climate mitigation and those sorts of things have been appropriately pursued or prioritised or even understood by this government. That's what we could have a productive conversation about. And that argument about whether the time is right for that just seems to me to be a bit like something really the media should just let go on in other places and not really facilitate it.
Well, there was also comment about whether it was too soon to be debating the role of climate change, political responsibility, etc., because people had just died and emergency was still ongoing. Did the media face that criticism too?
Yeah, mostly it was on the politicians for doing that. But I think I have seen some pushback on media, for example, for running some sort of background articles about, there was one by a guy called Kevin Trenberth that appeared on that academic website, The Conversation or service, and the media can republish those free of charge. And this was about ocean temperatures rising, and that might explain, the heavy rainfall that we're having so much more frequently now and causing almost annually extreme weather like this in the summertime. People saying, look, media, like others and politicians, should be focusing on the response and community needs, leave that scientific stuff, that context, till later. But on the other hand, I have heard on Talkback and in other forums, people, even in those regions, people talking, for example, in sort of Vox Pops on TVNZ's One News, for example, they are asking, why is this happening so often? They are perturbed by it, they've seen it, they've witnessed, they've lived it. They do have these questions and are asking them right now. So it would seem to me that that's entirely relevant and maybe the sort of thing you don't want to wait till the headlines change and the news fades to be asking those questions. Also, I've heard people express the surprise at is it a revelation? I don't know, but the assertion and geotechnical experts writing in some of these sidebar explainer scientific pieces that landslides are actually New Zealand's most deadly natural hazard in our modern times, more so than tsunami or even earthquakes. So that being a surprise to people, I think, is, at a time when it has become tragic and acute and people are wondering where could this happen next, that seems to me to be quite a good thing to do. Some talk radio hosts, for example, have also been talking about and having active discussions today on will we have to reconsider where we build and where we live, big helicopter issues. So if they're prepared to be advancing things like that at this stage, it seems a bit hypocritical to be saying now's not the time to be raising anything other than the recovery and the emergency effort and the suffering of people who've been affected. And for example, the Herald and ODT have both editorialised on this sort of is it the right time issue. The Herald saying it absolutely is the right time, and even the ODT kind of raising the question is, well, if things have gone this far, it's happening this often, and we're not prepared, is it already too late? And I think I'll try and have a look at some of the interesting coverage on this aspect on our Media Watch program on Sunday.
Okay, let's talk about morning news. Is it a shake-up? Most of the daily morning news shows returned this week for 2026, and there's change ahead for many of them.
Yeah, that's right. It's been pitched in some places as, a big battle, just because inevitably these things revolve around the personalities of the hosts, right? And there's going to be some change there. TVNZ Breakfast, intriguingly, this week back for the year, promoting itself as new and unmissable. And I sat down and watched it Monday and Tuesday, and it seems pretty much like last year at the moment. But they do have their new host, Tova O'Brien, beginning in April. TVNZ says itself. The Herald says she might begin in March, but that will bring a different flavour maybe to the show and maybe some different audience. Morning Report will have John Campbell along with Ingrid Hipkiss in Auckland, but his start date still to be confirmed. The Herald again were nagging RNZ to find out when, but they're just saying that has yet to be worked out and confirmed, but that's down the track as well. And then a further change, the Herald Now show, so not on television as things stand, that's the streaming show that the Herald launched on its website and app and on YouTube, a news show between 7 a.m. and 9, hosted by Ryan Bridge. They're going to change the name to Ryan Bridge Today, so very much building it around the host, and the platform itself will now become known as Herald Now. And they're going to, they've hooked up with Sky TV, which of course these days owns the TV channel 3, and they've put the show already on the 3 Now, the on-demand app for 3, owned by Sky, and it will be simulcast on TV3's broadcast channel as well. So in the future, you'll have TVNZ Breakfast with a new big name presenter on air on TV1, Morning Report on the radio, the Herald Now show called Ryan Bridge Today will be on their app and then also available eventually on TV3 as well. I thought it was actually already on TV3, but when I tuned in, I was actually watching a show called Alaskan Bush People on Monday, which was actually quite good, but didn't tell me much about the news in New Zealand. So I gather from the Herald covering this, they say there are technology issues to be sorted, but in the second half of 2026, in time for the election, that Herald-produced show will be on TV3 as well as the 3 Now app.
So it's going to be a bit like years gone by when TV3 and TV1 both had morning business news shows?
Yeah, a little bit, because what they're also doing is launching business news programs as well. So on this Herald Now platform, they're going to have Garth Bray, who used to be on Fair Go. You might remember him from there. He now works for Business Desk, which is part of the Herald NZME empire. He's going to do a business show from 6:30 on weekdays, so a half-hour show. The Herald says this will be launching in the first quarter of 2026. And at the end of last year, it emerged from job recruitment ads that TVNZ is preparing a new business show to air on TV on TV1 at the same time, though there's no start date for that. So it will be interesting that there will be more TV news shows. It will be a bit like years gone by. We used to have ASB Business with Michael Wilson that I think might have been on for a full hour from 6 to 7. That went up until 2012. And I was trying to remember what TV1's equivalent show was in the early morning before TVNZ Breakfast, and it was called NZI Business. And I found a clip on YouTube that said it launched in 2008 like this.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the first NZI Business. We're very excited to be bringing you the program in partnership with NZI Insurance.
Recognise that voice? That's Corin Dan.
That is indeed Corin Dan. We're having a flashback and we are charging forward.
Indeed. Well, I bumped into him at the vending machine in the calf here in Wellington before he went on the whip just a short time ago with Wallace Chapman, and he told me that he'd never done any television before that, in that first episode of
Amazing.
NZI Business. And you couldn't tell. He was wearing a pinstripe jacket and he absolutely looked the business. And I was thinking, tough time. In 2008, that was the GFC, wasn't it? So there was probably quite a time to be launched into a business show on television with no TV experience. But
and a great grounding.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, well done you finding that too. Now, is there a sudden demand for TV news in the morning, or is it always been like this and we're just more aware?
Well, there's clearly wasn't an appetite to keep those business shows going and the breakfast news shows, and of course TV3 got rid of their one as well. So you're sort of thinking what's happening here, but I don't think it's that. Well, I think what explains it is you have NZME and Stuff, these two media companies. They've both got into the game of video, live, daily news because technology has made that much, much easier and cheaper. It used to be much, much more expensive to produce live television. So essentially, we've got this interesting situation where we have two newspaper publishers, or the companies that were established as such, Stuff and the Herald, are now actually making daily TV news shows because Stuff makes 3 News for Sky owned TV3 these days. So you have these old newspaper companies are now making the daily TV news for TV broadcasters, particularly when the morning show made by the Herald, the Ryan Bridge one, goes on TV3. So yeah, it's quite a turnaround, and that's driven by technology, but also the fact that those newspaper companies are also looking for revenue, and they can get a bit of the advertising and the audience that TV breakfast shows deliver without having to spend a huge amount, or the sums you'd have had to have spent in the past, making, full service TV news live broadcasts.
Any other news changes of note?
Yeah, a few little things. So we've heard Guy and Espiner presenting a midday report this week, which has been interesting. More of that in a minute. Saturday morning show returns this weekend. Mihi Narangi Forbes and Susie Ferguson, and they've taken the start time back to 8 o'clock, which is interesting. And Country Life, which used to be on at 7 and was bumped when they introduced kind of newsy hour last year for Saturday morning, that's returning to that 7 a.m. slot. So I think maybe having the sort of newsy content at 7 to 8 on a Saturday hasn't quite worked, and fans that were annoyed about Country Life being moved will be pleased to know that it's on at 7 a.m, the customary time in its first run on a Saturday. And I know because I think I filled in on the first of the Saturday morning shows as the presenter after they'd made that change.
Because I was reading the news that morning.
Oh, that's right, you were too. So maybe you were seeing the text like I was about, where's my Country Life?
It was a tsunami.
What have you done?
Texts.
So those people maybe hopefully will come back on board. And just a couple of other little things. Rebecca Wright, formerly of TV3, so another former TV3 person and on their news program. She's been hired by Stuff Digital to add to their team that makes 3 News for Sky, and will do other video content, I guess, for Stuff. And certainly that's probably a hire with the, it being an election year, and she'll be doing political stuff for them, I imagine. And Corin Dan, who we mentioned, of course, later will become the business editor here at RNZ, and Giles Beckford, currently in that role, will become the economics correspondent. So all those changes all ahead. And I might have actually, now that I think of it, I might have done breakfast at TVNZ down by saying they're calling it new, but it's just the same for the moment. But actually there's a story on the TVNZ site about Ali Pugh, who's hosting until Tova O'Brien comes on board, and she told TVNZ in this slightly puffy article about the return of the show, in 2026 the couches have vanished from breakfast. The whole set has been given an overhaul from the previous theme that we'll call Forest's Edge, replaced by one that we'll call Urban Dawn, where the presenters sit on stools at high desks rather than lounging on sofas.
I did notice the Urban Dawn this morning. I just want to note that.
Yeah, because the Forest Edge one didn't go down well. I thought it was quite cool, but I think it was, I'm trying to remember who it was who called it like an explosion out of, if you've ever been to Changi Airport in Singapore, where they've created these artificial cascades of foliage and tried to make a natural environment in a very unnatural way. It was Paul Henry, in fact, in dissing TV3 at an ACT Party address, described it as a sort of mongrelization of Changi Airport. Anyhow, so it's not true of me to say that breakfast is entirely different. They're at tall bar stools and not on a couch in front of a fake forest.
That was a great midweek catch, though. I want to acknowledge you for that, Colin. Now, the art of the promo.
Oh, yeah. There
was an unusual promo that aired here on RNZ National, and it got your attention.
Yeah, now this is a bit in-house, this actually, because this was brought to my attention, because as I was saying earlier, I was in the wilds and not really hearing RNZ National, actually by one of your colleagues, someone not so far away. So I was cycling into Picton on my holiday when I received this tip that the promo was, here's a quote from my source, "Some incredible listening. I was shocked and moved while listening in the car." And I thought, well, it's not often a 30-second RNZ National trailer shocks and moves people. So when I got back, I sorted out, and this is the promo.
Requests, I've had a few, but then again, it's music for you. Yes, Saturday Night Requests is back again this Saturday. I'm Todd Zahner doing it my way, filling in again. And don't forget Late Night Hot Toddy from 11. Your music, your dedications, Saturday Night Requests from 8 on RNZ National.
There we go. And in the RNZ audio system, that was slugged as something like Todd Sung Cold. And, you know, the striking feature is completely unaccompanied, you know, a cappella. And maybe I shouldn't be that surprised.
Very bold move.
Yeah, see, Todd is Media Watch's go-to guy for voiceovers we put in the show. We're really grateful to him for that. So I'm pretty accustomed to hearing and recording his voice, you know, in a setting unmodified by music. But he's even sung before, because last year he kind of volunteered when Emil and my former colleague Hayden Donnell were doing sort of novelty Media Watch stings for our broadcast, and Emil was remixing them. They had great fun with that. Todd joined in by doing some a cappella ones, which again had that sort of stark quality. And when it came to our annual Midweek Media Watch Awards, Maggie Tweedy, who was hosting that night, gave Todd the award for his extremely simple a cappella Midweek Media Watch and Media Watch vocalised stings ahead of Hayden's musical compositions and Emil's sort of high energy mini beats per minute remixes. So he was very chuffed with that. So this is a guy not afraid to just let his voice out there without any backing.
Quite. I mean, it really is a bold move to sing unaccompanied on national radio. Do you think, or I mean, as you pointed out, you're used to his voice?
I think it was the bravery that prompted my source, who's not so far from you at this very moment, I think, to react to that, saying, you know, what a bold call to do that on the radio. But Hot Toddy Zahner knows he's not exactly Luciano Pavarotti. So this week, I can exclusively reveal and hopefully surprise the source of my tip. He's taken it up a level for his Saturday Night Request promo.
Requests, we've had a few, but then again, it's music for you.
Yes, Saturday Night Requests is back again this Saturday. I'm Todd Zahner doing it my way, filling in again. And don't forget Late Night Hot Toddy from 11.
On RNZ National.
Wow. Who was that?
That's RNZ Concerts' Clarissa Dunn. No disrespect to Todd, but perhaps a slightly more polished or accomplished singer. But again, just the effect of that absolute a cappella style when you're expecting to hear a kind of driving or atmospheric bit of music underneath, quite stark. It's not something I would do, not something I'm contemplating doing. In fact, I will exclusively reveal it's something I will never do for Media Watch. I would need to drown my voice out with as much music as possible. But
I thought that's what was coming next. Not that you had to drown your voice out, but that you had some secret promo.
No. But yeah, as I said, you know, Todd, out of the kindness of his very large heart, does do our voiceovers for us. So I'm going to say it's a bold, outstanding and distinctive move to have promoted your own program without any music whatsoever in song.
We've got a moment. Can we touch on New Zealand netball?
Sure, just briefly, yeah, because New Zealand netball had a terrible 2025, and there was some more bad news this week with stories that the professional players in the ANZ Premiership will be getting a pay cut. But as we know, the rights have gone to TVNZ. Sky have had it netball since 2008, but now it's TVNZ, and we believe from the reporting of, say, RNZ's Bridget Tunnicliffe and people who followed this very closely that New Zealand netball has actually had to pay to get it on the air. So it's not the lucrative thing that it used to be. And I just kudos to RNZ's Bridget Tunnicliffe and others for following the story and explaining it over the past year, because it's really sad. It's a national sport. It's the top women's sport or among them. And just a shame that, you know, the financials underpinning it and the media being part of it, because the broadcast is so critical, you know, can't keep it in a form that will keep the players in this country. Because as Bridget reports, I think 9 current and former Silver Ferns are already playing in Australia's better resourced and better paying competition overseas. So it's a shame there, but great that reporters like Bridget follow up on this very important sport.
And so does it mean that our top netballers are just going to go offshore?
Yeah, I think more of them might, because as Bridget reports, they get paid around, they believe, about 120,000 New Zealand dollars, which looks like at least more than double what the maximum amount that a player could get playing for the ANZ Premiership right now.
Good speaking with you, Colin. I'm delighted to have been introducing the first Midweek Media Watch on nights. Welcome back.
And the first a cappella music promos as well. Let's hope maybe we're not starting a trend, but we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed.